The paradox of this artifact is built into its very existence. We are looking at a photograph of a man who famously refused to have his image taken, yet the artifact physically exists, a shadow burned onto an iron plate. I used to view the lack of an airtight paper trail as proof that this couldn't be him, but treating uncertainty as absolute disproof is a mistake. There is enough physical and historical evidence here that we have to reopen the case. In this investigation, you sit in the third chair. You will hear the evidence, weigh the discrepancies, and ultimately you will judge the artifact for yourself. To evaluate the image, we first have to understand the gear that made it. The 1870s Bon-Ton camera was a bulky piece of equipment that used 4 lenses to expose a single sheet of iron. Because this process creates a direct positive on the metal, the resulting image undergoes lateral reversal. Everything you see on the final plate is flipped left to right. Expert analysis confirms that the physical gear used and the painted backdrop visible behind the sitter definitively date to the 1870s. The age of the image is compatible with Crazy Horse, even if the identity of the man remains fiercely contested. If it is him, the window to capture the image was incredibly tight. Crazy Horse lived in the white man's world for exactly 4 months, operating near Camp Robinson and the Red Cloud Agency. Looking at the timeline, the boundaries are rigid. The window opens with his surrender on May 6, 1877, and closes permanently with his death on September 5th. This strict 4-month block is the only period where a photographer could have theoretically accessed him. We know he held a deep aversion to cameras. The question for the third chair is this: does a general refusal mean a photograph was absolutely never taken? Or does it mean a sitting was simply a highly irregular event? To authenticate this tintype, we must accept that an anomalous, undocumented sitting occurred squarely within this specific 4-month bottleneck. First, we need to untangle the historical clutter. A photographer named James H. Hamilton listed a portrait of Crazy Horse as catalog number 104. No copy of that photo has ever been found. The Garnier family tintype we are examining is a completely separate artifact. We do not know the identity of the photographer who pushed the button for this plate, but a missing name in the historical record does not invalidate the physical existence of the face on the iron. Lakota eyewitnesses who knew him well, men like He-Dog and Hornchips, left specific physical descriptions. They noted his lighter hair, his lighter complexion, a thin, straight nose, and a slender build. Look closely at the man in the tintype. These specific indigenous descriptions map directly onto the features captured on the plate. However, skeptics point to a major discrepancy. Years earlier, a warrior named No Water shot Crazy Horse, leaving a pronounced scar on his left cheek. The man in this image appears unscarred, but the camera technology complicates this. Because of lateral reversal, a scar on the left cheek moves to the right side of the plate. When you combine this optical flip with the heavy studio retouching common in the 1870s, and over a century of physical degradation to the iron, finding a specific facial mark becomes incredibly difficult. The missing scar creates room for reasonable doubt, but without a verified comparison photograph of Crazy Horse to check it against, we cannot use the absence of the scar as absolute proof. The second major objection to the image is sartorial. Critics point to the elaborate clothing, specifically the hairpipe breastplate and the ascot tie. The argument is that the painted backdrop and the regalia look like they belong to an 1880s urban Wild West show, not the raw, dusty environment of an 1877 agency camp. The historical reality of the 1870s refutes that. Professional photographers were highly mobile. They routinely packed heavy glass, chemicals, and elaborate painted backdrops into wagons and hauled them directly into frontier agencies. So you have to evaluate the weight of these discrepancies. Does the debated scar, the formal clothing, or the studio backdrop disqualify the image? There is a tension in the skeptical argument. The clothing cannot be dismissed as borrowed urban studio props, while simultaneously being demanded as personal, authenticating Lakota regalia. When the physical forensics leave us at a stalemate, we have to look at the human history of the object. The origin of this plate traces directly to Baptiste Little Bat Garnier, a scout who operated in the exact same location, during the exact same 4-month window as Crazy Horse. This tintype didn't surface in a random antique shop. It was preserved and handed down strictly within the Garnier family over several decades. Eventually, Garnier's daughter, Ellen Howard, formalized this long-held family claim, writing a certificate of authenticity to document the artifact's origins. Western archival standards demand strict paper trails and institutional catalogs. But here we have a steadfast, unbroken line of Lakota oral history and family preservation. Rejecting this tintype outright requires a complete dismissal of indigenous oral provenance in favor of archival perfection. Strip away the historical noise and look strictly at the artifact. The absolute verification that modern historians demand has been permanently lost to time. But discarding this artifact due to circumstantial doubt ignores a striking alignment. The 1870s technology, the facial morphology matching eyewitness accounts, and the unbroken indigenous provenance all point toward the same conclusion. Based on the convergence of this evidence, the Garnier tintype is more likely authentic than not, but the final judgment remains with the third chair. The legacy of Crazy Horse remains as elusive and as heavily guarded as the man himself.